Hello and welcome to the video lecture for Chapter 5 in our online textbook entitled Qualia and Raw Feels. Now we have talked about qualia in several of our topics, but now we're going to focus on just qualia and only qualia for a bit more detail. The first new point that our author, Henry Shevlin, points out in our chapter is that qualia are both private and ineffable. Now this is going to be important, again, for materialism, because anything that's private to only one subjective viewpoint isn't easily discoverable by physical, scientific laws, empirical laws. Private, ineffable, means that it's beyond the reach of our language capabilities to explain qualia. So if you think about trying to explain what color is to a blind person, that's what they mean by ineffable. It's not a describable phenomenon. Our author also notes that some people think that we cannot be wrong about our own personal qualia. So even if we're hallucinating, even if we're mentally ill, and we are misrepresenting the world around us, our qualia are still our qualia. That's still the quality of our personal experience. So if we hear voices and we think that they're real, we have the qualia of hearing voices. That is a bit more controversial of a point, but some people think that we have to lump that in with being private and ineffable. He brings up the thought experiment we've already looked at, the knowledge argument with our scientist Mary, who perhaps learns something new when she steps outside of her lab when she sees the color red, and but perhaps she does not. Of course, that point is in dispute. People who have argued against this knowledge argument say that Mary didn't learn anything. She just gained a new experience, and experience isn't the same thing as knowledge, or perhaps it's a skill, like when you learn how to do something. Mary learned how to see color when she stepped out of the room to see red for the first time. And here there's another thought experiment that I wanted to bring up that's been referenced but never explicitly discussed, to try and demonstrate one more time just how ineffable qualia are, just how non-describable they are. But they still are an intimate and central part of the way we as human beings experience life. This is the inverted qualia thought experiment. Now I want you to imagine that there's you and a friend, and we assume that all other human beings that we know experience colors in the same way that we do. And indeed, you experience the color red as red, and you experience green as green. But unbeknownst to you, your friend actually flipped them. So they call what we would call the color green, they would call red, and what we would call the color red, they would call green. And this seems like it should be something that is easily discoverable. But if it's the case that for every instance of red and green, it's flipped for them, we would never be able to discover it. Because you'd say, what color is the top color on a stoplight? And they would say red, even though they saw the pictures on the right. And if you ask them what color is the color at the bottom of a stoplight, we see it as green, they would say the word green because that's what they've been taught of as green. That's how they see it. They see red and green inverted. They'd see the rightmost set of pictures, but they'd still call it green. So their personal, private, ineffable qualia would look flipped. We would never be able to discover it. And if you ask them what color blood was, they would say red, even though they see the color green when they get a cut on their arm. So what is it about qualia? Why can't we describe it? Why can't we figure out why colors look specifically the way they do and not inverted like it is in this thought experiment. We might be able to scientifically discover that they have different wavelengths, but that doesn't come any closer to saying why a certain wavelength should look red to our eyes and another one should look green. If it were flipped, the science would remain the same. The other new subtopic about qualia that our author talks about is how many kinds of qualia there are. First, we've been mostly sticking with individual sort of sensory experiences: color, touch, taste, smell, and hearing. What does violin sound like? What does sweetness taste like? What does cold feel like? And that is the standard definition of the qualities or qualia of living experience. But there's also something that it's like to feel sad, or to have a hope that something happens, or have a long-term goal, a 5-year plan. Some philosophers argue that these things count as high-level qualia. So true experiences, perhaps emergent true qualia or experiences of what it's like to be human. On the other side of the coin, people say there's no such thing as high-level qualia, that they can all be broken down into sensory tidbits. That these high-level qualia, like dreams and hopes and thoughts and doing arithmetic, can all be broken down into those basic qualia of smell, taste, touch, and sight. And you can see maybe the parallel between emergentists and reductionists in this dichotomy, where some say high-level qualia, like doing whatever it's like to do a math problem in your head, cannot be broken down into sensory qualia. And the reductionist says just because we can't imagine how to break it down doesn't mean it's not reducible. They're just the sum of all of our experiential parts. So you don't come into the world born knowing how to do a math problem. You have to build all these sensory building blocks that eventually get you to the point where you can do a problem of addition inside of your head. Now, some people who do believe in the rich content view or the higher level qualia make this particular argument to try and prove their point. Now, if you look at the illusion on the left here, this is known as the duck-rabbit illusion, because if you look at it one way, it's a duck, and if you shift it over, it's a rabbit. If you have a hard time seeing it, first, the duck, the two protruding things toward the left is the bill of the duck. But then if you reorient the way you look at it and the two protrusions instead as the ears, then you can see it as a rabbit. So the person who believes in high-level qualia would say absolutely nothing about the basic sensory data change when you shift from seeing it as a duck to seeing it as a rabbit. The colors are the same, the shape is the same. Nothing in our vision or basic sensory capacity changes. But there is a what it's like to see it as a rabbit and a different what it's like to see it as a duck. So if you add two numbers in your head, you can even do it simply. 5 plus 5 is 10. It's not a sort of exciting what it's like, but there is a what it's like to doing a math problem in your head. And it's not easy to describe how that would be broken down into taste, touch, smell, etc. So the people who argue against this kind of argument for rich content, higher level qualia, say that's an illusion. It only seems like there's a what it's like, but that's only because we have particular cognitive equipment and not because of some real new emergent phenomenon. Now, of course, some people don't like qualia at all. They don't like the way it's thrown a wrench into the works of the pure physicalist or the pure materialist, and they try and find ways to attack qualia as a problem for materialism or physicalism. So again, we have a parallel to reductionists and emergentists. Some thinkers say having qualia is just a byproduct. It's just a way of experiencing the world, not a new thing in and of itself. That whenever you're a living creature, you're going to be experiencing the world from a perspective. And of course, it's going to be dependent on the type of sensory equipment you have, whether it's sonar like a bat, electricity like a shark, or the set of tools that we have as humans to sense the outside world. It's not a new thing. It's just a perspective on the actual things in the world. And to try and show why qualia are a confused concept that we need to discard, a philosopher named Daniel Dennett has an example about cauliflower. It's a contentious vegetable. Some people love it. A lot of other people hate it. Are we going to say that their qualia are different? That it's the exact same physical thing that happens? What about even as an individual person? You hate cauliflower as a kid, but you grow to like it. For now, you're the same exact person, but you have two different qualities of experience. Are they really a new fact about the natural world? No. It's two different ways that one person experiences a fact about the world. And Dennett suggests that these experiences that we have are grounded in our attitudes. And an attitude is sort of a disposition to experience things in a certain way, or a disposition to look at facts in a certain way. So even from the personal perspective, we can't be sure of qualia as a real entity because they change for us throughout our lifetime, often, depending on how our sense organs are interacting with the environment at that moment, and how all of the other cognitive architecture, like our memories and our repeated trying of a food, will affect the way we experience something. Now, there are problems with the view known as naive realism. So the automatic pre-philosophical sort of idea is we experience things in the world as they are. When I see a book, I'm seeing the book as it is. It's a solid object, it's a rectangle, it has a particular color, a particular smell, and that's just the way it is in the real world. Now, there are some serious problems with that, notably the hallucinations and optical illusions and things like that kind of prove that we don't always sense the world exactly as it is. But it is a view that has very intuitive power for many, because it seems as if we wouldn't be able to navigate the world as well as we did if we didn't have some veridicality or realism. That's just a fancy word for matching the real world in our beliefs and in the way we sense things. This is a relatively short chapter, and that really is all that's new to us. Some of the other stuff we have gone over previously, but if you still have questions about qualia or how it ties in to anything else that we've studied thus far, please, of course, email me or come to office hours. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.